a strange child like that.
And people do just send me discs sometimes.
I still want to know who sent us the Hentai Star Wars.
I was contacted by David C. Fein, who was producer of the Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Edition DVD, produced the Aliens DVDs, and David is a big fan of the Star Wars radio dramas, and he joined me to talk about the radio dramas, to give a little bit of a history of them, and then also to bring to you, the Star Wars Action News listeners, these two clips that have not been heard in almost 30 years. And we're here with David C. Fein, talking about the Star Wars radio dramas. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
Doing good. And yourself?
I'm great. I love these shows.
Absolutely. I remember I actually listened to them once back in the 80s, just one episode. It just happened to be on the radio, and I never knew if it was weekly or how they aired them. And so I listened to the one that was on and never heard them until the 90s. But when I found them in the 90s, then I really latched onto these. I love them a lot.
Right, when they came out on CD.
Mm-hmm.
I've been obsessed with the radio shows for a long time. They were practically a cult following to everybody that I knew growing up. And these were public radio dramatizations done by KUFC-FM in Los Angeles. They were put together as if I remember correctly, for UCLA. It's going to be on national public radio. So when they brought everybody on board and invited everyone to participate in it, Mark Hamill came and Anthony Daniels, and they really knocked it out of the park doing these radio shows. I rushed home. I remember getting my cassette tape and having to record that original broadcast and absolutely loved it. And I think it was every week for 13 weeks they had the half-an-hour show, and I'd rush home and I'd record it and listen to it a million times, and my tapes would get worn, and I'd dupe my tapes, and they didn't have to go on and on. And Star Wars was so successful that they did Empire. But imagine, if anyone who hasn't heard them, 13 episodes, half-an-hour episodes. You're taking Star Wars, 2-hour, roughly movie, and doing it in 6.5 hours. And you'd think, what is it that could be so worthwhile? Or more importantly, what could be so interesting that you could want to listen to something for so long? And Brian Daley, who wrote Han Solo: A Star's End and Han Solo's Revenge and Han Solo and the Lost Legacy, these 3 books were just fantastic. And this guy really knew Star Wars and really did a fantastic job filling out the entire saga. George, I don't remember where I read this, but it was publicly stated that at that time, the only thing that George felt was canon for Star Wars was the radio shows and the movies. Of course, the movies first, followed by the radio shows.
And I remember reading that as well back on Usenet news groups in the early 90s.
Right. So anybody who's listening to this, think about George endorsing this as this is canon back then when nothing was allowed to be. I really encourage you to listen to the whole radio show and the radio dramas as soon as you can anyway, but that's a very important aspect of it. But Jedi and then Empire with 10 episodes for 5 hours, and then Return of the Jedi, which strangely is the longest film, but ended up being 6 episodes of 3 hours, is odd. Star Wars and Empire were done for National Public Radio, and that was it. And it was when they were doing the CD releases that they went back and did Jedi.
Because they ran out of money, right? The NPR just ran out of money and after Empire and couldn't finish it.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't even a matter of money. It was just that there wasn't the momentum that Star Wars and Empire had for everyone to get back and do this again. It might have been money considering the fact that they did eventually come back. But here's the thing. What's interesting is that most people didn't realize they did rebroadcast the radio shows. They did them first. And when they went back and rebroadcast Star Wars in 1983, just before Empire was aired or right after, they had changed the format of the opening credits to the show. It started out during the initial release as Star Wars, an adaptation for radio in 13 parts based on characters and situations created by George Lucas. That was the opening narration for the shows. When they did Empire Strikes Back, they just had, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, based on characters and situations created by George Lucas. They went back and edited the Star Wars shows and changed the opening to Star Wars A New Hope, based on characters and situations created by George Lucas. And that's one of the first things, we're here to talk about the cuts that are missing at this point. That's how we started talking, how I met you already, and how we started talking about this. Which, by the way, my collecting genes in me makes me continue to listen to your show with every new podcast. I greatly enjoy it.
Thank you.
How else can I keep up with everything without doing all the research myself? The first change that I noticed was they took out an adaptation for radio in 13 parts, that little section, and they had changed the opening. And then in the end credits, I noticed that they also changed the end credits to match Empire Strikes Back, where they said Star Wars A New Hope, and then would have the end credits recorded.
Do they say A New Hope? I've listened to these so many times, and I'm not recalling them actually saying Star Wars A New Hope. I know they say Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, but I didn't think they added A New Hope.
Well, that's what's interesting. See, here's what's odd. If there was again, jumping to the CDs for a second, when they did the CDs, they reverted to the original openings again.
Okay, and that's what I'm familiar with.
Exactly. And what's funny is that those other alternates, openings and closings, are on the collector's edition set of the CDs. So it's funny that it kind of was one direction, went to another direction, and then went back to the original direction in some way. But what's also interesting is when they went back and did that rebroadcast and did the new opening and beginning and end credits, they also cut some scenes from the shows. Specifically, my understanding, Episode 1, Episode 2, and Episode 5 had scenes that were edited from the series when it was rebroadcast in 1983. So what ended up happening was I noticed that there were, some really pivotal sequences that a lot of people have mentioned that they didn't remember, like for Episode 2, Leia talking about how she walked from the spaceport back to her home and, talking about the plants and the flowers and such that she was seeing along the way. It was a great little personal moment that was missing. And some other major sequences were missing, like Luke talking to Camie in the beginning of the first episode about did she ever dream? And that was an important sequence as well. So I always kept my original tapes because I recognized that those scenes were missing because, like so many of us, we watch the things 50 times that if something's missing, you suddenly fall over yourself. Like, wait a second, that's not what I was expecting, and you practically trip over yourself. So being as obsessive as I was, and still am in some ways, it was hard to listen to the rebroadcast, but I did. Then, a number of years later, I heard that they were going to finally be releasing the CDs of the radio shows. And that was a big deal because all I had were the old cassettes and I really wanted these on CD digitally because it was so fantastic. Well, the biggest problem that they had, which delayed it for so many years, was how do you sell CDs of the radio show when it was charity, National Public Radio. And the agreements that they had were for charity, for even the voice talent. It had to be not sold. So there was a lot of trouble that happened that they had to go and figure out how they could finally sell these, but the deal was done. And as part of this, Penguin Highbridge, who was putting it out, went back to Tom Vagley and had him prepare these for release. A lot of this is information that I learned in my travels. I had a lot of opportunities to have some insider information on this because my partner, Mike Mendocino, did the Star Wars soundtracks, the 2 CD sets. And we both were, in love with the radio shows. And we connected years ago about things like the Wilhelm scream, and which actually I've now hidden in my Trek project. But among other things, the radio shows were things that we both loved. And so they were preparing a CD release. So they went back to Tom Vagley, who was the engineer for the radio shows. And the shows were analog edited and created analog. And as part of preparing them for a CD release, which of course is digital, technology had improved, and Tom, it's my understanding, went back and pulled the radio shows and transferred them to digital and did a complete remaster of them so that they would sound better than they ever had. And at that time, I had contacted Penguin Highbridge because I really got the impression that everyone was very happy that the CDs were being released, but I didn't get the impression that they realized how much of a cult following there was to these radio shows, that it became to me as important as the films because, again, this was a period where you might have had videotape of the films, but Star Wars was coming out of our pores. It was just so much in who we were, and we listened to these as something to enjoy why you're not watching the films. And it was much a part of growing up. And in that sense, these were very important. And knowing that scenes had been removed for the 1983 rebroadcast, I had to contact them. So I hunted them down, the Penguin Hybrids people. I don't remember who I spoke to, and I apologize to that person, but, I spoke to a woman, I believe, who was the producer on the project, and I finally found her and cornered her to have a conversation. And I was told that they were just coming out and that they were happy that they had them. And I said, you really have to appreciate how much of an interest there is in this. And there needs to be a special edition. There needs to be something that goes back and has every last little bit of deleted audio and just really is something special for those fans who just really are in love with the radio shows and can appreciate the radio shows for every bit of what they are. And she said, really? And I said, of course. I said, absolutely. We love these. And it'll be a guaranteed sale. You'll have no problem if you did this limited edition or otherwise, or at least did the special edition for everyone. So I was surprised. I was very surprised and very happy that I think a week or so later I spoke to her, and she said she pitched it within the company, and everyone said, wow, what a great idea, let's do it. And I said, fantastic. And I said, you need to get those deleted scenes, etc. That's when she said, we have Tom Vagley on it, he knows everything, it'll be great, no problem, trust us, everything will be fine. And I was happy. It's funny, too, because at that time in my life, when someone says, trust us to know everything, I was still a kid, and I was like, yeah, great, wonderful, go for it, do it. I know you guys can do it. You guys must know more than I do. And the release came out, and it was fantastic that they put the making of, and they had the radio commercials, and I was very impressed that they actually knew that the opening and end credits were different. And and they actually included both the alternate opening and alternate closing for the special edition versions. And then on episode 2 and 5, they included original director's cut from episode 2. I'll give you an example, Leia's return to Alderaan. And I was very happy that they included that in there. And then on episode 5, they included original director's cut from episode 5 in Ben's house. And I listened to these and I went, okay, great to have it. Wish it was in the show, but where's the other two pieces? And then another little segment that's just a music edit and some sound edit. But where are the two segments of Luke and Camie talking about dreaming, and a little bit of an expanded piece with, Ben finding Luke? I mean, the line, the Jundland wastes are not to be traveled lightly, is not there anywhere. What happened? And it wasn't until Mike was working, I tried calling, we didn't really get through, other than got the message that this was all we had and this is everything, isn't it? And I went, no. Well, Mike was doing the Star Wars soundtracks, and Tom, because of the success of the CD releases, had finally been given the green light to start putting things together for the Return of the Jedi radio show, which they did after Star Wars and Empire were on CD. Mm-hmm. And part of that agreement was that they had to be broadcast for free first on National Public Radio. While they were gearing up to complete Return of the Jedi, and Brian Daley was writing it, thank God. I mean, it's sad to say that Brian Daley passed on before the radio shows were completed for Jedi, but thank God he wrote them to at least have the same tone and the same brilliant writing behind the Jedi shows.
However, from what I understand, just to interject, since we're giving the listeners a little bit of a history, because he was ill, he only was able to complete a draft, and that draft was then completed by John Whitman, who did the Galaxy of Fear kids books a little later. And, there's some people, including myself, who have some issues with some of the things with Return of the Jedi, the radio drama, such as the inclusion of Mara Jade and things, and that's all Whitman's additions. And you can still feel the spirit of Brian Daley in there, but it just, in my opinion, it's not up to par with what Brian did alone.
I would have to agree with you. Jedi never really felt right. It was tacked on, and it never quite felt perfect.
No, and like you say, there's a lot of reasons, but I think the biggest was that Daly wasn't the sole writer, and then the loss of Mark Hamill and Billy D. Williams and having Ed Asner as Jabba the Hutt, it just didn't quite fit.
Yeah, that's like having me as Jabba the Hutt. It's all processed down where you don't know who he is or what he's doing. It's just anybody could have played that. But the fact that they had Ed Asner. So when they were gearing up to do the radio shows, the question came up from Tom, do we have Latinx, that music? And since Mike was busy preparing the Star Wars albums, the 2 CD sets that came out, the funny part is Tom vaguely got in contact with Mike because he was doing those. And the funny part about it is we couldn't, at the time, Latinx couldn't be located for that album, but it wasn't going to be on that album anyway because it was the special edition soundtrack. Therefore, Jedi Rocks was going to be on it. But there was a multi-track up at Lucasfilm that Mike had mentioned to Tom, and Tom did get that for the radio shows, the Return of the Jedi radio shows. But at the same time, the opportunity came up to say, what the hell happened? You're missing 2 sequences from the radio shows on the radio show release. And what had happened, it's our understanding, is that when he was transferring from analog to digital, his masters said that those were the finals and were the only versions, and that he had everything. And for some reason, he didn't remember those pieces being missing as well. And when he went back, he discovered he didn't have them anymore. So there's 2 sequences that were only available on the original broadcast airing. And he said, hopefully somewhere in the Lucasfilm vaults somewhere someday, they'll find some videos, some audio tapes that say, or some master tapes that say, original review copy masters of the Star Wars radio shows, and that somebody at that point will have the wherewithal to remember that there's still 2 pieces missing that have not been heard. And as I say that, there's 2 pieces that are two pieces of dialogue, and then there's just one little music edit and sound effects edit, which I don't even think is really relevant to even put back because it doesn't have the same quality as the CDs do. Well, the point of this was, as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have the original broadcast tapes, and not broadcast tapes, but the original copies that I made from the original broadcast. And when the CDs came out, Mike returned to our tapes, those sequences into our Pro Tools editing system, and brought in the CD masters and cut those sequences that we do have back into the shows, and did our best to equalize and bring it up and bring the quality to the level of the CDs. And unfortunately, they're not the quality of the CDs, but the sequences are special nonetheless because of the content. As I mentioned on your forums, I actually printed the page numbers and the scripts from what those pieces were. What I was going to say is that the Star Wars radio dramas also had books published of the scripts. So the Star Wars radio drama book, starting on page 22, there's a point where Fixer's talking about matching Biggs' best time through Beggar's Canyon. If you've never heard the radio shows, but you know about the Biggs and Fixer scenes, and you've heard about them or seen them on the Behind the Magic CD-ROM from years ago, those scenes were actually, some of the scenes were actually filmed for the movie until George came to his senses and said it is okay to start with the droids and everything else. Tom filled in the backstory and actually had the full Skyhopper scenes where Luke flies his Skyhopper through Beggar's Canyon. The first scene, and this is the big important one, the other one's just a little bit of dialogue, but the most important piece that's missing is a little bit about Luke's background and Camie and Fixer's background. Fixer was the town bully. Camie was his girlfriend.
And let's go ahead and play the original clip, or the clip that you'll find on the CD of the radio drama now.
So, what's on the program for today, Fixer?
Speed runs, Skywalker. Speed runs.
Oh?
Gonna see how much time I can shave off the back stretch.
There's no way you can cut much more time off your lap, Fix. You're almost matching Biggs' best time around Beggar's Canyon as it is.
Yeah, well, Biggs isn't here, and I am. I'm as good as he ever was.
Oh yeah, well then why don't you thread the stone needle like Biggs did?
Luke.
That ought to take 5 seconds or better off your time.
Yeah, and Biggs is the only one who ever flew through it at racing speed. Is that what you're saying?
I was just saying that if you want to improve your score,
You're crazy, Luke. Why don't you guys go buzz the Womp Rats and take a few pot shots at him? This speedrun stuff is gonna get somebody killed.
Hey, what's the matter, Camie? You don't think I can do it?
Oh,
Listen, anything the Great Big's Darklighter could do, I can do.
I never said you couldn't, Fixer.
Yeah, nobody was knocking you, Fixer.
Besides, I don't need any shortcuts. Hey, do you want to try and keep up with me?
Oh, Fixer.
Huh?
What, me?
What are you scared, Wormy?
Yeah. All right.
Oh.
You're on.
Crazy.
Boy, Wormy against the Fixer. That's gonna be a slaughter.
Well, then you can ride with Fixer, Deke. What are we waiting for, boys? Let's go.
Fixer! Come back here, Fixer! I want this to stop right now.
What it was basically is, on the regular Fixer goes off to go look at the canyon and try and plan out his course, and while he's there, Luke has a conversation with Camie. The whole conversation with Camie was cut, and this is the piece that was missing that is not on any, as far as I know, not on any release of the radio shows, and at this time is lost. So here's that piece.
So, what's on the program for today, Fixer?
Speedrun, Skywalker. Speedruns.
Oh?
Gonna see how much time I can shave off the back stretch.
There's no way you can cut much more time off your lap, Fix. You're almost matching Big's best time around Beggars Canyon as it is.
Yeah, well, Biggs isn't here, and I am. I'm as good as he ever was.
Oh, yeah, well, then why don't you thread the stone needle like Biggs did?
Luke.
That ought to take 5 seconds or better off your time.
And Biggs is the only one who ever flew through it at racing speed. Is that what you're saying?
I was just saying that if you want to improve your score, you're
You're
gonna have
crazy, Luke. Why don't you guys go buzz the Womprats and take a few pot shots at him? This speedrun stuff is gonna get somebody killed.
Hey, what's the matter, Camie? You don't think I can do it?
Oh,
Listen, anything the Great Big's Darklighter could do, I can do.
I never said you couldn't, Fixer.
Yeah, nobody was knocking you, Fixer.
Besides, I don't need any shortcuts. Come on, Windy. Deep.
Hey, where are we going?
To take a look at the canyon. Take my course.
See you later, Skywalker.
Yeah.
Oh, did you have to get him started?
What? Me?
Fixer's like a kid sometimes. Just when I think he's ready to settle down, he decides to go out and swipe some parts for a skyhopper or something. You know, I had this dream the other night. Do you have a dream?
I don't know. Yeah, I think I dream about my parents sometimes.
Well, I dreamed that Fixer and I were married. Oh, it was so nice.
Hey, Skywalker, get your macro binoculars. Fixer wants them.
Well, who are you ordering? They're in my hopper. Get them yourself.
Now look, Skywalker.
You better hurry. You wouldn't want to make Fixer wait.
All right. And don't think I won't tell Fixer you said that.
Said what, Skywalker?
Nothing, Fixer.
Yeah? Well, it may interest you to know that I have got the perfect route through the bottleneck.
Yeah, Fixer's got it all figured out. He's gonna clock the best time anybody's ever made around Beggars Canyon.
Including the Great Big's Darklighter.
Yeah, well, if Biggs were here, he'd show
He
you...
ain't here, Wormy. Hey, do you want to try and keep up with me?
Oh, Fixer.
So it came back. It really started with, besides, I don't need any shortcuts. Come on, Windy Deke, where are we going? And take a look at the canyon. That's where the deleted scene came in, and it came back with, so, do you want to try and keep up with me? And they cut that whole segment.
Yep, I've never heard this before, and I could tell exactly where that was. That was really something to hear.
Yeah, that's the whole point. And if you listen to it, it's some pretty powerful things. You're talking about the only time in the history of Star Wars that Luke is saying, I had a memory of my parents. I dream about my parents sometimes. That's a pretty powerful statement when you consider the saga and the story. But that was cut, and the only reason that it was cut, the only reason any of these scenes were cut, was when they had to change the opening and end credits to the show to make it match Empire Strikes Back. The running time had to change, and they had to trim it down a little. So in trimming, they had those extra little bits, put the ones that they thought they pulled originally back on those CDs, but this is one that was clearly missing. So to my knowledge, what you have there, and as I said, I've given it to you, Kest, and you can have 1 million people now sitting down and cutting into their Star Wars radio shows. Your little broadcast of that sequence, that's the first one of the sequences. So what do you think? That's it.
When you told me you had these, I didn't know what scenes they'd be, what characters would be involved, and I never figured it would be Hamill stuff, let alone Hamill talking about his parents and having a real character moment like Daly is known for putting into the stuff. That is a glaring omission. And, honestly, I hate the actress who does Camie on the radio drama. she does okay there.
Yeah, and it actually expands her character. She's nothing in the others, but here's a moment where she says, I dreamed Fixer and I were married. I was like, wow, other people have lives. It's a good character moment. Other things happen. And, having heard that, you can tell that it's a serious loss when you know the show so well. How could you have that moment, gone? And either I'm going to be considered overdramatic or people are going to agree with me. And I've also learned that so many people say, yes, I have that deleted scene of so-and-so, and then you find out that, it's the same thing that's been on the CDs forever. And they just don't know what the hell they're talking about. Well, there it is. And I pray to God sometime someone's going to, find a recording master and make it available, and I'll be more than happy to take it and put the shows back into Pro Tools and have it professionally assembled back into the shows. Anybody who has original recording masters, any masters that went to the different radio stations across the nation, let us know. Episode 1 and Episode 5 for that piece. Now, you want to hear the Episode 5 piece?
Please.
It's really not much, but the funny part about it is they cut a line that's in the movie for Episode 5, and basically it's when Luke first runs into Ben.
So here's the scene of Obi-Wan and Luke after the Tusken Raider attack from the CD release of the A New Hope radio drama.
So I wasn't wrong. It is Luke Skywalker. What? Well, hello there, little droid. Come here, my friend. Well, don't be afraid. Huh? Oh, don't worry. This young fella will be all right. Luke?
What happened?
Now, rest easy, son. You've had a busy morning. You're fortunate you're still in one piece. Few are lucky enough to emerge alive from a hand-to-hand contest with a Tusken Raider.
Who are... Ben? Ben Kenobi. Boy, am I glad to see you.
Yeah, take it slowly, son. That's quite a clout you were dealt.
What made the Sand People leave?
I imitated the hunting cry of a crate dragon. Their imaginations did the rest, and they took to their heels. Tell me, young Luke, what brings you out this far?
This little droid here. R2-D2 here claims to be the property of an Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that a relative of yours?
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
It's a few lines here are cut down. Ben's next line is, the Jundland wastes are not to be traveled lightly. Tell me, young Luke, what brings you out this far? Oh, this little droid, That stuff is cut where the other version doesn't play as well and doesn't play like the movie.
So I wasn't wrong. It is Luke Skywalker. What? Well, hello there, little droid. Come here, my friend. Well, don't be afraid. Huh? Oh, don't worry. This young fella will be all right. Luke?
What happened?
Now, rest easy, son. You've had a busy morning. You're fortunate you're still in one piece. Few are lucky enough to emerge alive from a hand-to-hand contest with a Tusken Raider.
Who are... Ben? Ben Kenobi. Boy, am I glad to see you.
The Jundland wastes are not to be traveled lightly. Tell me, young Luke, what brings you out this far?
This little droid here. I think he's searching for his former master. I've never seen such devotion in a droid before. There seems to be no stopping.
Yeah, take it slowly, son. That's quite a clout you were dealt.
What made the Sand People leave?
Their own fears, and with a bit of help from me, I imitated the hunting cry of a crate dragon. Their imaginations did the rest, and they took to their heels.
Like I was saying, R2-D2 here claims to be the property of an Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is that a relative of yours?
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
There's little pieces that pick up and fall there, like what brings you out this far is when the CDs as they are, but then it just goes back and forth between little bits. I mean, most powerfully, why did the Sand People go away? And the thing that was cut was Ben's comment, their own fears with a little help from me. That's a great character moment.
I really think that the actor who did Ben, unlike the actor who did Camie, I thought he did a wonderful job in that entire role throughout. It's minor things, but it's minor things that can make such a difference. I mean, you look at some of the cuts in the special editions or even the DVD movies versus the theatrical movies for the prequels, and it really can add or take away so much. And when you're dealing with something like Star Wars where collectors like to have it all, they want the uncut versions. And I think that just goes to something about our generation. We want the 3-hour Lord of the Rings, We want it all in there.
Right. It's almost like I could understand why a line here, a line there in that sequence might have been missed during their remastering job, but to lose the Camie dream sequence, not dream sequence, but the discussion of the dreaming, that's something that very much surprised me, that it would be missing at all, because that's a really powerful moment. And there was even a point where I was wondering, before we spoke to Tom, was there something at Lucasfilm where they didn't want that in there because it referenced Luke's parents? But there's really nothing in there nothing but good character development. And the answer was because it was just running time, and that was something that really didn't affect the storyline much. It didn't go in and say, we have a problem, that this changes the story if you cut that sequence. So I could understand if they had to just say, what piece can we cut? Mm-hmm. I could understand them cutting that. So there was another moment later on where there's a natural pause in the sound where it pauses for a moment and music plays a little and there's some wind that blows by, and then we come back to the story. And that was what was beautiful about the radio drama, was that it was dramatic, that it made a difference the way that it was directed. And speaking of the direction, did you notice who directed it? It was John Madden.
Oh, right. I not the football player, quite obviously.
Not the football player, but he did Shakespeare in Love. He actually went on to have a great career as a director. Captain Cornelius Mandolin, but Shakespeare in Love. He had done a number of shows, like the Storyteller, Greek Myths, and a number of other different projects, but these were all from his work on the Star Wars radio shows. His whole career started with the radio shows. If you look on IMDb, that's the earliest thing that he has is BBC Two Playhouse in 1982, which was still after these shows. He was nominated for an Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. I mean, that's a really brilliant thought, a brilliant comment that you have for somebody when he started with these, that you could tell his talent back then, that he would go on to something as fantastic as Shakespeare in Love.
But of course, he didn't return for Jedi.
No, he didn't. And that's the thing that really shows some of the difference. Jedi wasn't there, and in a weird kind of way, you might say that it mirrored the films the same way.
Yeah.
Jedi's not Empire, and nor is it Star Wars.
No, but no, it's not. But I like Jedi. I'm very defensive of that. I know that if I'm looking at the original 3 objectively, it may be the weakest of the 3, but it's still a hell of a lot stronger than most things out there.
Look, I absolutely believe that Jedi is a great film. I'd watch it any time over episode 1, 2, and 3 anytime.
Well, David, thank you very much for bringing these to light. I mean, I had no clue that there even were missing scenes, and it's really an honor to be able to share these with people. So thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad that we have an opportunity to get them out there in such a big way. I said I've been sitting on these, and the CD releases came out, always hoping that they'd find something, or I'd find something, and these would finally get out there. And I was listening to your show, and it was because of your site that was used. So you're actually doing something for the community in a positive way here as well by saying, yes, I want this. I want to be able to present these. And hopefully we're going to spark something where everyone who loves the shows will now, as I said before, take these, start cutting up your podcast and put them into theirs. I did the best we could to make them match as it is. And if you don't have the sets, be sure to pick up the box set that came out a little while ago of Star Wars Empire and Jedi, which also has a lot of other extras.
Which I didn't even know about until I was doing research for this interview, trying to find anything I could about cutscenes. I didn't even realize that there was a set beyond the set I had. I had the first set, which is, 13 CDs, I think? No,
CDs.
And then there's another set that, as you were talking about earlier, has the ads and it has making ofs and the creation of scenes, and so I had to go out and pick that one up.
And also had the nice tribute to Brian that they never got to play for him. Do you know about the Lost episode,
No.
Arnie?
No, I don't.
Or at least I declare it the Lost episode, and so does Mike, and a few of us have always declared it the Lost Star Wars radio show episode. And what it is that there was, between the period of doing the Star Wars radio drama and the Empire Strikes Back radio drama, Buena Vista Records did a story that was written by Brian Daly that was in the right size to fit one radio show, and it was Rebel Mission to Ord Mantell. And if you listen to it, even though it was cast differently with different people, and it's a little bit dumbed down for kids, no offense to anyone, just a little bit softened, it plays as a radio show between Star Wars and Empire very, very well. And it's the only one that Brian wrote. So in the underground, it's somewhat been considered the Lost radio show.
I'd never thought about that, but you're right. It's about a half hour long. It does fit.
Right. And it's actually also has a lot of the quality that you'd enjoy with lower vocal talent without, no one from the original extra. But when you listen to it, put that between Star Wars and Empire and you have an extra show, and it actually works. It's kind of interesting, and it always answered the question of the bounty hunter we ran into Ord Mantell, that statement, which was what Brian was doing. He was filling in the blanks. Well, it's a shame he didn't do more writing for Star Wars. I mean, unless I'm missing something, he did the 3 Han Solo books and the radio shows, and of course, you can pick up his radio show scripts, but which have a few extra things here and there. And by the way, everything that I've played was in the radio show books, so the scripts.
Well, Dave, thanks for joining us, and thank you again so much for bringing these segments to light.
Great.
Thank you again to David C. Fein, and again, his website is twolivefools.com. He's got a podcast.
Is that like Two Live Crew?
It is. It's 2 livefools.com. You can listen to his podcast, read his blog, and just find out more information about David and his insights into Hollywood. And Marjorie, to bring the dissenting opinion, you're not a fan of the radio dramas.
No, and
I would like to recreate my trying to expose them to you. It was Celebration 3, and I was very much in Star Wars hype mode. Episode 3 was about to air, and we are driving to